Torah Outreach Program, 54 Chabad Street in the Jewish quarter of Jerusalem. Telephone 288-968. I'm speaking to you from my sukkah, a temporary booth in the old Jewish quarter of Jerusalem. Jews are required every year for a week to live in such a booth, to eat and sleep there. On the morning of October 8, 1990, after sleeping in my sukkah, I got up to go down to the Western Wall for what should have been one of the most joyous days of the year. Every year on Sukkot, thousands of priests come, descendants of Aaron, from all over Israel to bless all assembled and the whole world with every sort of good, and especially with peace. Many thousands of people, maybe as many as 20,000, come to share this blessing and the joy of the holiday, including many non-Jews. This year, for the 10th year, the Christian Embassy in Jerusalem has brought thousands of non-Jews to Jerusalem to join the celebration. On this holiday especially, the Jews pray for the whole world, and when there is a temple, bring sacrifices, things to draw the animal and man closer to God for all 70 basic civilizations. The Bible predicts that when the third temple is rebuilt, all nations will come up, send delegates on Sukkot to share in God's blessing and the joy of the holiday. But this day, October 8, 1990, was not fated to be as happy as it usually is. Arabs, thousands of them, had massed above the Wailing Wall on the Temple Mount, outside the Dome of Omer, to attack the Jews praying, together with others, at the Western Wall. Darren Glassman, a young American student, came down to the wall to film the festivities and blessings of the Kohanim, of the priests. He stayed around to film the crowd after this had happened, and while he was there, the riots broke out. Our Jewish Video Center obtained a copy of his videotape. We edited it to show the most essential elements, the blessing of the priest, and the attack, which occurred about an hour later, and that's what we're about to present before you. It's very fortunate that the blessings of the priest had ended before the attack began. Otherwise, rather than just 21 of the murderous crowd dying and many Jews being injured, literally hundreds, perhaps thousands of Jews and non-Jews at the wall could have been severely injured or killed by the barrage of stones, including very heavy rocks, which you will see. Also, a brave policeman, as soon as the rioting broke out in the Temple Mount, walked out on the rampart overlooking the wall and warned everyone to quickly run away. So, with God's help, the damage was minimalized. At the end, after the attack, you will see Jews singing and rejoicing, very reminiscent of the scene at the Red Sea as Pharaoh and his army drowned rather than capturing the Jewish people. We're not happy that this had to happen. It would have been much nicer if Pharaoh and his army went along with God's plan to establish the Jewish people in their land, to bring the whole world back to Eden. However, we're happy that once they did choose evil, they were not allowed to complete their evil, but were destroyed. Similarly, the Jews are not rejoicing at the death of whatever Arabs died. At that point, they probably didn't even know if any had. But they're rejoicing that this attempt to kill and seriously injure hundreds and thousands of people and stop their prayers and rejoicing on their happiest day of the year failed. And this is a pattern throughout history. We don't concentrate on mourning the Nazis and even those innocent Germans who were killed, but we concentrate on thanking God that Hitler did not win World War II and destroy the world. And the same thing for an Arafat today or a Saddam Hussein in Iraq. At Passover, when we tell the story of the Jews' escape from Egypt, we spill a drop of wine from our cup every time we mention one of the 10 plagues. Our joy is not complete. This is not the ideal world where everyone is good and where everything is good and where means are as good as ends. And we're sad about it, but that doesn't stop us from drinking the cup. And we hope the whole world will join our rejoicing, including the Arabs themselves, as our sources predict. When the third temple will come, all men will return to themselves and God, and everyone will come up to the spiritual center of the universe, Jerusalem, where God lives. He has offices everywhere. The whole world's full with his glory. But here you can sort of meet him in his den with his pipe and slippers. And we hope our Arab brothers will join us in future Sukkot celebrations. After we complete the video, I will take you on a brief tour of the old city from my rooftop to see just how this could have happened. After that, there will be a biblical overview of the mission of the Jewish people, God's purpose for man in the world, and the purpose of the state of Israel to put this incident into perspective. It's not just a piece of news, a local skirmish between two groups in Jerusalem in October 1990. So it's another incident, hopefully one of the last, in the millennia-long struggle of the Jewish people to do their mission and shape up, and of others who are against their mission to stop it. If you have any comments or questions, we'd be very happy to receive them from you. Thank you.
No, but where they have all those rocks over there? I thought this is, I mean, this doesn't happen this once in a blue moon, every year? Why? Why? But they're coming with Jamie? Oh, your card. Oh, I thought you were talking about, oh.
Did you get that ambulance?
No, I think so, yeah. album you need.
Oh, God. I gotta get a copy of this tape, dude.
All right, no problem. Now the tape is 11 minutes already.
What?
11 minutes of this already so far.
Alright.
Not so bad up here. Down the top. Oh, there's Randy.
Yeah, it's Randy and Dembo.
That's his name, Dembo?
Dembo. Keep it going. Keep it going. Here comes some more.
I feel like a war going. It's like where's the panic here doing?
Poor women.
There's a whole bunch of men on the other side. They're inside.
Men are okay, but the women are who I'm worried about. Truman, they must be freaking out.
What the hell is they saying? I feel like a war going. It's like where's the panic here doing?
Is this your camera?
Yeah.
That's good.
It's clear?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
I mean, in black and white, how close do you want to do?
no, that's in black and white. Oh, they're coming. They're pushing them right against the wall.
Yeah, but right over here now. They're right on time. I've been late, suckers.
Get a picture of that.
I got it.
I got that. What's Marvin? What do you mean?
Now they need to
That's what?
choose one.
What's Marvin? Marvin means what?
My college.
Then you really feel it.
We had a ride on campus.
What? Yeah, let people throw the stones at
That's different cases. Arab.
Shalom again. This video you're watching is part of our video library of over 300 titles at the Jerusalem Jewish Information Center, 54 Chabad Street, Jerusalem. This project is supported in part by a grant from the Jewish Agency for Israel. I will now take you on a rooftop tour of Old Jerusalem to illustrate how this attack of October 8, 1990 is not just an isolated skirmish or incident, but part of a pattern over the last century to, in every way possible, harass the Jews who want to live in Jerusalem, their holiest city, and who want to pray at their holiest site, the Western Wall at the foot of the Temple Mount. We will show some illustrations of how this was done and is being done, and after this tour, I will give a lecture showing how this is part of a millennia-long process of Jews trying to do their mission in Israel and those who want to destroy them doing their best to do so. We'll start with Mount Scopus. On Mount Scopus, we now see the rebuilt Hebrew University, which is adjacent to the rebuilt Hadassah Hospital. Both of these institutions serve people from all over the world, including many, many Arabs. Both were in existence in 1948 when they were destroyed by Jordanians and local Arabs who had benefited from them tremendously. And they even slaughtered relief convoys who were bringing food and water to those few people who had been left there. They have now been rebuilt, and many of those very Arabs who are injured in trying to destroy Jews in the state of Israel are treated very well at Hadassah Hospital, and many Arab students study at Hebrew University. We sweep from Mount Scopus across a very nice Arab neighborhood, Sheikh Jarrah, to Ramot Eshkol. Whereas the Arab neighborhood is between French Hill, which adjoins the university, and Ramot Eshkol. These are new Jewish neighborhoods which were built since '67 as a reunified Jerusalem, where everyone should be able to walk everywhere in peace, continues to expand and grow in every way. We now swing down to the Christian Quarter, which is only about a block from where we're standing. The Christian Quarter was the site of what I consider the latest outburst of blatant anti-Semitism. The building near us with the red roof is an old abandoned hotel. It was run by Jews until 1929, when the Arab pogroms drove most Jews out of what's now called the Muslim and Christian Quarter back into what we now call the Jewish Quarter. During all the period when Jews suffered from pogroms and when they were barred from praying at the Western Wall by the Jordanians, who turned it into a garbage dump, local churches made no protest. Books I've seen from the American colony community in 1951 virtually don't mention that the state of Israel exists and try to excuse the Arab pogroms as an attempt to maintain the unity of the land. About a year ago, some young idealistic Jews who had settled in old Jewish houses in what we call the Muslim Quarter bought this building to refurbish it as an inexpensive hotel for visitors to Jerusalem. The church, in an attempt to appease their Muslim neighbors, suddenly raised a huge furor. How can we have the sacred nature of our churches and neighborhoods spoiled by Jews living next door? An absolutely amazing phenomenon. Most of their neighbors are Muslim, and most of the stores around them are Muslim. They did this, in some instances, in the name of Martin Luther. Martin Luther, besides being the founder of modern Protestantism, was also the father of modern German anti-Semitism, culminating in the Holocaust. He advocated the persecution and expulsion of the Jews when they rejected his new religion, which he thought would win them over, as opposed to the Catholicism which he himself had rejected and which earlier persecuted the Jews. So this is what happened just a year ago in the Christian Quarter. We now will go to the Jewish quarter for another view of recent Jerusalem history. Negative. I live in Interfaith Corner, as I like to call it. At this corner, people of the three faiths meet. On my right is an Assyrian convent church, which still uses a form of Aramaic, which language is shared with the Jews who study the Talmud. Our house and the building across from us are Jewish at this same corner. And right below me is the dome roof of a small mosque. At this corner, everyone lives in peace, thank God, and it's a model for what Jerusalem can be. In addition, many Christians, indeed, are friendly with the Jews, want to learn about Judaism, and know about its religion for universal mankind, the laws of the 7 sons of Noah. We see in the distance Brigham Young University. Its students, those from the Mennonite College in Virginia, and about 3,000 Christians from all over the world came at Sukkot to learn about the Jews and to share the Sukkot celebration with them. We had many of them in our center and in my sukkah. However, looking a bit to the right in the Jewish quarter over the roof, we see an arch. This arch was put up as a memorial to the main synagogue in Jerusalem, the Chorva synagogue, which was demolished and desecrated by the Jordanians and local Arabs in 1948 War of Independence. That's all that remains is this arch and a few remaining stones from the original structure, which you can see. Other synagogues, such as Chabad, fared better because they used them for stables and storage rooms. But in no case was their holiness respected. No Jew could enter the Jewish quarter during the 1948 to 1967 occupation by Jordan. And no Jew could even come to the Western Wall. The Muezzin calls all Arabs to prayers to this day. Church bells ring, calling Christians to their churches. But Jews could not approach the Western Wall. The British wouldn't let them sit down until 48 at the wall. From 48 to 67, they could not even approach the wall in any position. The Jewish quarter faces the Mount of Olives. On the Mount of Olives is the most ancient and revered Jewish cemetery, where many of the greatest and holiest leaders of the Jewish people lie buried. During the years of their conquest, the Jordanians ruthlessly took headstones off the graves, used them to pave roads all over the mountain, and culminated it with the 7 Arches or Intercontinental Hotel on top. Even Christian neighbors here have told me how they suffered from Jordanian soldiers under the veneer of British civilization. The British had indeed aided the Jordanians and Palestinians in every way in their pogroms and efforts to destroy the new Jewish state. From the Mount of Olives, we go down to the Temple Mount itself. The Israelis in 1967 risked and probably lost Jewish lives in hand-to-hand fighting rather than aerial bombing in order to save all the historical and religious sites belonging to other people, even though they were bases for the hate and attacks upon the Jews. And so they were given the keys to the Dome of Omer, the Waqf, even though the Mufti, the head of the Muslim faith here, had joined Hitler as an ally in World War II. And that place was used to incite mobs against Jews. And for 20 years, until the Intifada, we had relative quiet. Even though the Arabs obliterated every trace of Jewish presence on the Temple Mount, and that this was the site of the holy temples of the Jewish people, the Israelis let it go. And they prayed there as much as they wanted, as many people as they wanted. The Israelis even let the neighboring Arab areas, the village of Silwan, just below the Temple Mount, and the large part of Jerusalem called East Jerusalem, Muslim Jerusalem, to the left of the Temple Mount, which we'll see shortly. They did destroy them in any way. They left them as they were, even though these people were among those who tried to destroy the state of Israel and drive all the Jews into the sea. They had begged Jordan not to take part in the war, but Jordan chose to do otherwise. So on October 8, 1990, we now can see everything is so close here. Yeah, my Jewish quarter ends with the Arab market one block this direction. Another block is the Christian quarter. The Armenian quarter, another half block away. So all the Arabs who lived around the Wailing Wall, which is at the foot of the Dome of Omer, converged on that morning of October 8, 1990, after newspapers had called them to come to public demonstrations against the Jews in Jerusalem. But apparently, the police were unaware that this was not just a demonstration, but an active effort to stone, injure, and kill all the thousands of people coming to hear the blessings of the priest at the wall on that particular day of the Feast of Tabernacles. And that's what happened. Local Arabs, Arabs from Hebron, all came through Silwan and East Jerusalem, and they all came up to the Temple Mount on that fateful morning. So we see a picture of persecution of Jews in Jerusalem for this last century. We'll just take a brief look at East Jerusalem before going on to the next segment in this program. Okay? We now see East Jerusalem, one of the larger neighborhoods in Jerusalem, which is 99+% Muslim, even though it was once, to a great extent, Jewish. There are now, we see a few Israeli flags here and there, a number of young Jews who have bought at exorbitant prices what were once Jewish apartments before the pogroms and the War of Independence, and resettled them. And they bravely live with having many little children amidst the Arabs, and have lived there peacefully. We hope that by next Sukkot, God willing, somehow the Arabs will drop this attempt to drive the Jews out and join with us in celebrating that holiday of Sukkot, when the Bible invites all non-Jews to join the Jewish people in Jerusalem, to return to God together, and that from the state of Israel, from Zion, shall go forth Torah teaching to the whole world. Having explored briefly now the last 100 years in this city, we will go back about 4,000 years to the time of Abraham and understand how this century's drama itself is only part of a drama of millennia, of a special mission to the Jewish people to help mankind, and how those who were on the other side have tried to stop it. Please join us for the next segment. Shalom.
Now we're downstairs in that portion of my home, which is approximately 150 years old. This building started as a Christian missionary hospital in the early 1800s. And when Jews then built the first Jewish hospital around the corner in response, it became a pharmacy. After the Six-Day War, it was renovated with additions to become a small apartment building for 6 families. The mission of the Jewish people is a universal one, a combination of being different and yet being very much part of everyone else and everything else. We start the Bible, the Torah, with the story of Genesis. God doesn't make any Jews. God doesn't mention the state of Israel, the land of Israel, or the Torah. God creates man, Adam, and his other most necessary half, Eve. They go off and do their own thing, a sin of animal passion, sensual passion, to eat the one forbidden fruit, the one non-kosher fruit. God doesn't bother with prayer or meditation in those things at that stage. The first stage in man becoming man, a divine being, and not animal, is that he can control his physical impulses toward food, drink, sex, etc. So God gives him one non-kosher fruit. Man does his own thing. God sends him out of Eden, which is really what he wants, to be on his own, and puts there angels with fiery swords to guard the way to the tree of life. Not to keep man from it, but so it should still be there when man's ready to go back to it. The Torah itself is called a tree of life to those who grasp it. The sin of passion is followed by a sin of pride and aggression. Cain kills Abel in the religious war. Abel brings the best of his flocks for a sacrifice. Cain just wants to procreate God and gives lower grade produce. And God chooses the sacrifice of Abel. Cain's response to God's choice of someone else's religious worship is to kill him. So now we have individual sins of passion and pride. Mankind develops in that direction. The flood generation washes itself out, corrupts its way upon the earth. It's a generation of oversatiated passion, which leads to violence, not because of an innate nastiness or aggression, but simply to satisfy the habits. One man, Noah, is called righteous. He walks with Elohim, the Lord of creation. In Hebrew, that word for God equals 86 numerically, which is the equivalent of Hateva, nature. Noah is a good Vermont farmer, a man of God, an honest man, a kind man, and a man who leads a decent family life. He has one wife, his children each have one wife, and they're the only survivors as mankind washes itself out. Then comes, on a mass scale, Cain's sin, the Tower of Babel generation. They're not busy with passions. They're quite in control. But they use their control to make mass man, the Soviet system, that is, thank God, now crumbling apart under Gorbachev. And their thing is to build a tower to conquer God himself. And they're all one language, no individuality. A power-mad society has to have everyone fit into its structures. And so universal man, as God intended him to be in the Garden of Eden, has failed. Now God takes a new tack. One man who relates not just to the aspect of God in nature, impersonal laws, but to the God of infinity, love, and kindness, Avram, who will become Abraham, is the first in a series of patriarchs who are to create a model man for the rest of the world to follow, to come back to the tree of life in the Garden of Eden. Abraham does a lot. He goes around spreading knowledge of God and kindness, maybe a one-man Jewish Salvation Army, day and night. He has two sons, Isaac, Yitzchak, and Ishmael. Ishmael may share Abraham's very gregarious, exploratory nature, but he does not continue his values. He uses relationships for physical pleasure and so forth. His other son, Isaac, Yitzchak, is the opposite type. He doesn't go around preaching. He has only one wife. He can never leave the land of Israel, only at the most go to Philistia. And he develops another side of the human personality, that of conquest, by becoming a model of discipline, order, and depth. He has two sons, Esav and Yaakov. Esav, like his father, is a man of mastery, of strength. But instead of using it to conquer himself, he abandons Yitzchak's value systems and uses it to conquer others. In our tradition, he is the founder of the Holy Roman Empire, which leads to Western Europe and its crusades and holocausts. We now come to Yaakov, the third patriarch, who after a long metamorphosis becomes Israel Yisrael and is the model man. At this point, we will turn to two murals on Yaakov's life, which were done in my home by a Jerusalem artist, Elias Sukkot, who with his wife returned from somewhat of a bohemian existence to become strictly observant Jews with a large family in Jerusalem under the influence of Rabbi Shlomo Carlebach, the folk singing rabbi. We will now look at his murals. Yaakov starts as a perfect whole man of integrity who basically stays in tents, a man of family and a man of study and prayer, while his brother Esav is a man of the fields, a wild man. When it comes time for Yitzchak to die, there's a dispute over who should continue Abraham's mission to bring mankind back to Eden. Rebecca, Isaac's wife, prevails. She says it should be Jacob who will take over his worldly mission as well as his spiritual mission. Isaac, from the beginning, wants Jacob to take over the spiritual mission, But he feels the world should be run by Esav, who will then support the seminary, support the yeshiva, support Yaakov, Jacob. Rivka, a little girl who did not grow up in the house of Abraham, who's a returnee from Las Vegas, a repentant idolatress. She knows what happens to a world which is run by Esavs, because she grew up in such a world. Her father and brother are master manipulators. And she has a new idea, that Yaakov, man of the spirit, should also become Yaakov, man of the world. And when she somehow tricks her husband into realizing and seeing that you could combine the two, and that the same Jacob who is to get the spiritual blessing should also have physical blessings and be a leader in the world, in human society, he has to run away to his uncle Lavan to learn about the world as his brother Esav tries to kill him. When he runs away, God sends a prophetic dream to Yaakov as he sleeps at the site of the temple where God's presence will be manifest on earth, which is today the site of the Dome of Omer, where an attack was made to stop the mission of Yaakov's descendants on October 8th, 1990. Here in this mural within an ancient arch, not so ancient, 150 years, but for some places that's ancient, Yaakov is sleeping on a pile of stones at the site of the temple, temporarily occupied by the Golden Dome down the street. In his dream, according to legend, he sees a ladder with the whole future of his descendants inside the ladder. The ladder is spoken of in the Bible, with angels climbing up and down it. Angels means those who do God's work, perhaps laser beams, atomic energy. So these white energy lines represent the angels. And Jacob sees Moses leading the Jews out of Egypt. He sees King David with his harp, reaching the very essence of the human soul in all cultures, in all places, forever after. And then David's descendant, the Messiah, coming on a white donkey, meaning he masters and purifies the physical world, not just the spiritual, coming through the gates of the old city to bring the Messianic era, when all Jews will return to Israel, which will become the world's spiritual university, where all people will find their way back to their most inner selves and to God from the temple. What is the name of this game? Why does God give this special mission to the patriarchs and their descendants, who are going to get through Moses a Torah with 613 commandments as a kingdom of priests and holy nation, Exodus 19:6. The rest of the world is also included in God's Torah, but they have 7 basic categories, the laws of Noah. They are not priests by designation. Anyone who wants to become a Jew can, but we discourage it because it's darn hard, and God never said anyone else had to do it. We will see, though, what on the other side of this mural, on the other side of the arch, is the ultimate dream. Culminates in a gate to heaven, which comes down to earth as a gate to the tree of life in the Garden of Eden. Okay? Jacob's ladder rests on earth but reaches to heaven. The function of Jacob is not to be in a monastery, again, at Rebekah's dream, but he is also to link heaven and earth with his ladder. He's not to be earthly, and he's not to be detached from earth. He's to sanctify earth to bring heaven down to earth on his ladder while he rises to heaven. And finally, the net result is the tree of life, which is still there, guarded in the Garden of Eden, which in some traditions is an olive tree. And as the state of Israel grows again, Jacob is to bring all mankind back to the tree of life. Nature is corrupt now. God made the world where he saw that everything he made was very good. It's not that way now. There's destruction, disease, warfare, hate. The Messiah is not just some sort of mystic. The Messiah is a great human teacher who will end wars. We know the Messiah has come when wars stop, when people stop hating each other, when the lion and the lamb, Israel and the nations, dwelt together. So this shows the tree of life and harmony and peace, which is to come to all mankind from the state of Israel once the Jews get in shape and really achieve their mission of being a kingdom of priests and holy nations, a holy nation, to the rest of mankind. The next mural shows that this is not such a quick and easy task. and perhaps gives a much deeper level of understanding to what happened in the attack on the Jews at the wall. Yaakov's planned short stay in the school of hard knocks of his uncle Lavan turns out to be a good part of his life over 20 years. He may never see his mother again. When he finally has to leave because Lavan is uncomfortable with Yaakov's hard work and success, he's married his daughters, but he's accumulated a lot of sheep and servants and so forth. Yaakov is no longer the simple man of tents. He's a holy man, but a holy man who's very much in this world and a leader of it. So he comes back, and before his dangerous encounter with his brother Esau, which turns out quite well in the end, he's met at night by a mysterious divine figure, which we call the angel of Esau. That Esau is not just an individual, but he personifies a certain evil spirit throughout history between the Garden of Eden and the Messianic age. And this mysterious angel, according to the biblical account, according to Maimonides, it's a dream, but whatever, it's an important message. This evil angel almost kills Jacob the whole night. He struggles with him, and Jacob limps, he's wounded, he can't stand up straight in the sciatic nerve, but somehow he gets through the night. In the morning, all of a sudden Jacob begins to win, and the evil force says, "Let me go, for dawn is risen." And he then blesses. Jacob won't let him go, which is very strange. You should be glad to be rid of him. He won't let him go until he gives him a blessing. And he blesses him and tells him he will be called Israel because you've successfully struggled with God and man. What does all this mean? Rabbi Hirsch explains it beautifully, Samson Raphael Hirsch, and our artist, Elias Sukkot, has done a mural of this historic moment. Shalcheni, let me go, ki Allah hashachar, because dawn has risen. The idea is that at some point in history, the Esavs and Yishmaels will stop trying to stop the Jews' mission. They will stop trying to kill Jacob. They will be willing to leave him alone, if for no other reason than that Jacob will suddenly be strong, and they will be afraid of his sahal, of his army. But that's not what Jacob wants, just to be left alone and not hurt. His purpose all along was to bring man back to Eden. He has a mission, a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. His purpose is to be a blessing to the rest of the world as God promised Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So he says to the evil force, it's not enough you leave me alone. I won't let you go. You won't be rid of me until you bless me, acknowledge me as the source of your blessings. You may be the best ones in material things in this world, and that's your world. And it's wonderful. Without it, we can't live. But if you want to really know God, you have to come to his land, to the land of Israel. And the Bible says, especially at Sukkot, at this holiday of Sukkot, according to the Bible, when the third temple is built, any nation which will not send a delegation up at Sukkot to celebrate with the Jewish people will not receive God's blessing. And the Christian embassy, again, for the 10th year, has brought thousands of Christians to commemorate this future happening, as Jews commemorate their mission and their past and their temple. So in the mural, we see the angel of Esau, who's shown without a clear face or a clear body, because in Jewish mystical tradition, evil is only a shadow reality, masking the true good which permeates everything in God's world. And from this evil force of Esau comes the destruction of the temple 2,000 years ago, the center point of the Jewish religion and of God's presence on earth. And then come the Crusades, where Jews were killed when they would not convert. Thousands and thousands of Jews had to leave Western Europe, those who survived, and go to Eastern Europe at that time. The Crusaders burned alive in their synagogue on July 27, 1099, the 6,500 Jews of Jerusalem. And there was basically no Jewish quarter until Nachmanides came after he was expelled from Spain for winning a debate with the Catholic Church in 1263 and rebuilt the Jewish quarter. His synagogue is around the corner from our center. Then, of course, this whole process of Esau's people, the Roman Empire, the Crusaders, culminates in the Holocaust. Perhaps spurred on by a notorious anti-Semite, Martin Luther, who urged the expulsion and torture of the Jews when they would not accept his new faith. Holocaust is shown toward the bottom of this mural. The nadir, or the absolute pits of the night of Jacob when he just about dies. 1/3 of Yaakov dies, and he limps badly. But then suddenly soldiers turn into Israeli soldiers, and Jacob begins to get strength again just when he's dying. And the state of Israel emerges out of the fires of the Holocaust. And eventually it will lead to a third temple, whose symbolic utensils representing every realm of life, light, agriculture, learning, the animal passions of man and so forth, begins to emerge along with symbols of peace in the redeemed world. And at that moment, we look forward to all nations coming to the state of Israel to rejuvenate their spiritual batteries, to be friends with the Jewish people who don't want to dominate them or hurt them, but who want to teach them. Unfortunately, throughout history, be it Ishmael or Asa, be it the Crusaders or Martin Luther, be it the Inquisition or Hitler, there's been a determined effort by those who don't want man to be spiritual or godly, really, to stop this Jewish mission. Some say we just don't want God like Hitler, that our pagan spirit's been ruined by the Jews via Christianity. Others say God changed his mind. We're the real Israel now. That's Islam and much of Christianity. But God tells the Jews their covenant is forever, and someday it's all going to happen. They can be scattered to the four corners of the earth and to the heavens. They can be in the most far out physical and spiritual places. He will bring them back to this very land. And from Zion shall come forth Torah and the word of God from Jerusalem. The attack which you witnessed on the people praying at the wall at the beginning of this video is just one more step, and maybe one of the final ones, in the long night of history, as Ishmael in this case, or Asa, tries to stop Jacob from his mission. Yom Kippur represents the pinnacle of the Jewish mission. When Jews really try to shape up, that's the day of the 1973 war. Sukkot is the celebration with God after they have shaped up, and when they invite the rest of the world to join them and share their spirit. That's the day that they were attacked at the wall, just when the priests were delivering their blessings of peace to the whole world. And their subsequent celebration, despite almost dying and many people wounded, shows that there's faith that no matter how many gang up on us, be it Iraq or Iran or Hitler or whoever, no matter how many gang up on us, even her, the Jews will survive, this land of Israel will flourish. Now the Russians, then the American Jews, all Jews will come back here. God will be revealed again. The Messiah, a human teacher, will bring everyone back and then teach the whole world God's will and Torah, and everyone will shape up from here. And the attacks you saw will not stop us. And the Jews continue their holiday, continue living a prelude to what will one day be the state for all mankind for eternity. Let's now go to our clips on the incident and the holiday on which it occurred. This was a Crusader church, we found out. When we started the institution, we just had enough money to buy an old garbage room which no one wanted. The building itself turned out to be about approximately 800-900 years old. Come in, I'll show you what we found. This is what we found underneath the trash room of the Jewish Quarter. After several years of peeling all the old plaster, cleaning, and hauling away tons of debris, we have a Crusader church about 800-900 years old. This was especially appropriate because the Crusaders, as we mentioned, had destroyed the Jewish Quarter completely and killed all its Jews in 1099. Now their place is a Jewish information center featuring just about every Jewish video we can find, and 300 lectures on video, which you can come in and watch anytime. One picture here really illustrates the point at issue in the October 8th, 1990 attack. This lithograph, also done by Elias Sukkot, shows Jews at prayer and study, bringing into the universe, especially into the heart of man, the sense of God's reality of his kingship. This is the process which we hope will redeem the world and which the bloodthirsty mob tried to stop on that hopefully joyous day of Sukkot. In the rear is one of our Jewish video areas. This wall in back is from the Byzantine period. It's from about the year 6 to 700. We know nothing more about it.
But now the repentant Herod restored
Particular video that's playing at the moment
who never saw the temple
is
rebuilt by Herod,
art,
has never seen
history, and prophecy regarding
and the
the
mystical
three
teachings of
temples.
Judaism say further that since the day the temple was destroyed, man has not seen at all. For with the destruction of the temple, the gift of sight that God gave mankind was dimmed. Seeing in its truest sense will not be possible until the holy temple is once and forever rebuilt. To understand something of
In the
extraordinary
background
greatness
is
of
another
the holy
picture of
temple,
Jacob's
we will go
ladder
back to
linking
the
heaven and
Its
earth,
first
the
movement
function
to
of his
the wilderness
descendants in the
Sinai
land
during the 4
of
years
Israel.
that God led the Jews through the desert.
We'll now go to our other
A portable sanctuary
video center at 52 Chabad. Okay. In the course of our excavation, we saw a little bit of light in this section of the Crusader ruin. And about 100 donkey loads of dirt later, we found we had a very, very old cistern, which was the way the old city got its water. They would pray all winter that there be enough rain for the summer. About the mid-1800s, an Iraqi Jew above this building built his synagogue at home and made a passageway to draw water up from the cistern. By the mid-1800s, as we mentioned, Jerusalem was predominantly Jewish. We'll now discuss, in the light of two paintings, the struggle to build the state of Israel and how that struggle today is as much against the media as it is against the Arabs. The two paintings in front of me show the two very difficult struggles of the modern state of Israel. The first, the upper picture, is the struggle of war, the road to Jerusalem. In 1948, the Arabs blockaded the road to Jerusalem, trying with British help to starve out the Jews of Jerusalem and destroy them. Heroic battles occurred to open this road, and finally a famous road was built circumventing it in the most difficult terrain. This picture by Michael Steinberg, an immigrant Russian Jewish artist, shows a divine tank in the sky, God's help with the Israeli army, pitifully outnumbered and underarmed, fighting the well-trained Jordanian Legion and all the other Arab armies who had so much help and ammunition from the British. We go down to his lower picture, an angel over Yamin Moshe, the other great difficult task of the Jews, to restore the desert to a veritable Garden of Eden. Yamin Moshe, outside the old city walls, was one of the first new Jewish settlements in Jerusalem, aided by Sir Moses Montefiore in the last century. And again, a divine force is at work helping them to rebuild this land after Jews came back scattered from all over the world against innumerable odds. But the third battle is neither against the Arabs nor the desert, but against the Western media. This last incident on October 8th shows how much the world hates the Jew, personified by the Israeli, and how much they will distort things to make the Jews the bad guys in what was an attack on their peaceful prayers at the Western Wall. I'll quote some recent clippings. Reuters bureau chief Robert Mahoney sent a letter of apology to Government Press Office Director Yossi Omar for any offense he may have caused in his story on Simchat Torah's celebrations at the Wall. Omar had demanded this apology, for Mahoney wrote that Jews sang and danced near the bloodstains of 21 Arabs shot dead by police, a 1990 blood libel. Obviously, as you saw, any Arabs killed were not at the Western Wall. They were above it on the Temple Mount. Several days later, any bloodstains obviously would have been gone and cleaned up already. This is simply blood libel, trying to turn the Jews' celebration at their deliverance into something to indict them with. Mahoney at first refused to apologize, saying his story was accurate. Similarly, in some of the video news reports, they juggled video footage to show Israeli police chasing an ambulance away from a wounded Arab. What they didn't show was that same Arab simply being taken in a different ambulance at that time, which was shown on a different network. In an article by Moshe Saperstein in the Jerusalem Post, his comment was Jewish blood was cheap again. Just days ago, when the Israeli police, having to choose between protecting Jewish worshippers at the Western Wall by putting a force on the Temple Mount, or playing to Arab sensitivities by leaving the Jews unprotected, chose the latter with the tragic consequences that ensued. The mistake made on Yom Kippur 1973 was made again on Sukkot 1990. Again, the Jews were charged with being the aggressors when 45 policemen defended themselves against thousands of rioters, and the 21 lives lost was a very small number compared to the hundreds in similar riots in Saudi Arabia itself. We see here too the double standard. Whatever the Jew does is wrong in the eyes of the media. We'll now go to a letter from Mark Escala. This was in the New York Times. No creativity with the Middle East map will cap the well of Arab hatred for Israel's existence. The crux of the Middle East dilemma is that there are no rules by which Israel can play. Israel is not dealing with an adversary prepared to arrive at a rational, reasonable, and peaceful solution to a border dispute. In such a context, a Western-oriented, rational, reasonable handling of, or solution to, the Arab-Israeli conflict is virtually impossible at this time. It should open American Jewish eyes to the extent to which Israel is in a no-win situation. Rather than criticism, Israel merits understanding, compassion, and respect for the extent to which it has been able to cope in such an irrational and hostile environment. Now, in an attempt, after it was clear to all what they had done, the Arab leaders said, well, they were really scared that the Jews were taking over the Temple Mount. What they're referring to is an attempt made every year for many years by a small, odd, fringe element called the Faithful of the Temple Mount to remind the public that the Temple Mount is a Jewish site, though the Arabs have obliterated all mention of Jewish connections to the site. And they tried to set up a cornerstone for a third temple, things which 99+% of all religious Jews condemn, because we're not even allowed to walk onto the Temple Mount. So every year they come for a few minutes, the police don't let them up, and that's the end of it. This year, the court actually barred their entry days before, so no one should have any possible fears of their doing anything. Let me read from a letter of Seymour D. Reich. Mr. Lewis also wrote that the Palestinians may have been unaware that the Israeli Supreme Court had barred the Temple Mount faithful from a proposed march to the Mount, or doubtful that the court order would be obeyed. In fact, Mayor Teddy Kollek of Jerusalem told me that he personally had made certain that all of the Arab language newspapers in Jerusalem published news stories about the court's action prohibiting the march way before it occurred. And indeed, when about 20, 30 people did come to the Western Wall from this group, they had left way before this attack occurred. They came much earlier in the morning. Mr. Reich continues. Certainly the Arab leaders on the Mount knew the march had been barred. Perhaps they were doubtful that the order would be obeyed. That is hardly reason to attack Jewish worshippers at the Western Wall in prayer on the festival of Sukkot, with stones, boulders, knives, and shards of glass. And, as I add, the Temple Mount people had left already. Mr. Reich continues. It is ironic that Mr. Lewis now faults Israeli officials for failing to have a sufficiently large security presence on hand for crowd control. In the past, he has condemned Israel for maintaining too large and visible a police and military force at trigger points, charging that such a policy constituted provocation. I have no doubt that the commission appointed by the Prime Minister of Israel to investigate the Temple Mount incident will be useful in helping the government avoid a repetition of the tragic event. The communists blame capitalism on the Jews. The capitalists blame communism on the Jews. The message is clear. This is the angel of Esav fighting Jacob's missions. I'll show you the last part of our center, our other videoing area, and then we'll go on to film clips from the videos themselves.
Begin by studying not from the Old Testament, but from the Talmud.
This is Nachmani's dispute with the Catholic Church.
At the time when the temple was destroyed, the Messiah was born. What an extraordinary statement. The temple was destroyed about 1,200 years ago, around about the time of the beginning of Christianity. Now let me put the question directly to Rabbi Moses. Why are the Jews waiting for the Messiah when their own Talmud tells them that he came 1,200 years ago?
What do you have to say to this, Rabbi Moses?
Your Majesty, with respect to Brother Pablo, the Talmud does not say that the Messiah came at the time of the destruction of the temple. It only says he was born.
But isn't that much the same thing?
No, Your Majesty. When Moses came to lead the children of Israel out of Egypt, it was 80 years after he was born. That was hardly a task for a newborn babe. Similarly, the date of the Messiah's birth is by no means the same as the date of his coming.
And when will be his coming?
When he leads the Jews back to the Holy Land. That hasn't happened yet, so he hasn't yet come.
You mean to tell us that the Messiah was born 1,200 years ago and that he still hasn't come?
Yes.
Must be getting pretty long in the tooth then, 1,200 years old.
Adam lived almost as long as that. And Elijah, who never died, has lived very much longer and will return together with the Messiah.
Where has the Messiah been all this time?
The Talmud says in the Garden of Eden.
Do you really believe that?
Many more incredible things than that are believed in the name of religion, Your Majesty. I personally do not believe that the Messiah was born at the time of the destruction of the temple. I think he has not yet been born.
But the Talmud says quite distinctly that he was born then.
It is poetry, a parable. You Christians know what parables are. It's a way of saying that hope is born in the very depths of despair. Should not be taken literally.
Are you saying that the Talmud is telling lies?
Parable is not a lie.
But Rabbi Moses, you are shifting your ground.
Not at all. If you want to take literally that the Messiah was born, then I have given you my answer. I personally do not take it literally. That's clear enough, sure.
Was forced to debate the Catholic Church in 1263 by King James of Spain. When he won and published the results, he was expelled from Spain, and as an elderly man came to Jerusalem, gathered a quorum, 10 families of Jews from all over Israel, and restarted the Jewish quarter in 1265. His synagogue is found around the corner from our center. As we remodeled this center, the local Bank Mizrahi also remodeled. And they had a mural, which they no longer could use. It was obtained for us by its artist, Francois Bono, one of my pupils. And we put it together piece by piece, and it fit within an inch our wall space, leading us to think this is where God wants it. Its theme is the hills of Judea surrounding Jerusalem, out of which in our day, Jerusalem reemerges. This reemergence of Jerusalem is not just a this world phenomenon, but indeed it is a prelude to another Jerusalem, Jerusalem of heaven being revealed, revelation of God to and within man from the state of Israel. The Talmud quotes the biblical verse, Jerusalem built up as a city where everything is united in it. And the one unity is that of heaven and earth, besides all mankind. Rabbi Yochanan said, the Holy One, blessed be he, said, I shall not come to Jerusalem upstairs until I have indeed come to Jerusalem downstairs, the rebuilt Third Temple, on the site of which the attack occurred on October 8th. The symbol of the temple, which most illustrates the messages we have given, is the menorah. And that's what we will look at next. This menorah shows the view held by the Ibn Ezra and is depicted on the Arch of Titus that the branches are curved and the cups upright. The mainstream Jewish view, for example, Rashi and Maimonides, is that the branches are straight and the cups reversed. In any event, the Bible says that the 6 branches shall come out of the center trunk, and all their lights should face back to it. Abarbanel, a great medieval commentator who was a victim of the Inquisition, he commented that the 6 branches represent the 6 branches of secular wisdom. Only from a Torah, from God having revealed himself to man, do we realize that God wants to communicate with man. And then we explore the world to see what messages he built into nature, what we call the laws of nature. Man does not work automatically. He's not pre-programmed like all other beings. He needs a guide because he has choice and intelligence. So from the Torah, from one God who creates everything and communicates, comes the basis for all secular science. Mathematics, physics, music, the arts, everything. But each of those realms itself then sheds its light back on the Torah. Through God's works and our own minds, we then understand God's revelation. Thus, it is very important that the entire world receive the Torah. And the Bible tells us that will only come from the state of Israel. For from Zion shall go forth Torah, and the word of God from Jerusalem. No amount of stones and no amount of people will be able to break these lights. We're now going to see a bit of the film clips from the distorted U.S. news media. You'll notice on ABC Nightline, they tried to set it up as though the Arabs were defending themselves, thousands of people, against the 30 Temple-bound faithful. But they show the Temple-bound faithful leaving, and in fact they left way before the stoning. And the stoning is at the wall. And even the scene they show of the Temple-bound faithful, just preceding it, shows them walking away from the wall about a block away. This is typical of the distortions via video on U.S. prime television.
Biblical temples. The Western Wall is all that remains of the ancient structures. To Muslims, it is the noble sanctuary, containing both the Al-Aqsa Mosque and the Golden Dome of the Rock, the place where it is written that the Prophet Muhammad ascended into heaven on a white horse. These fundamentalist Jews were going to march to the area and to lay claim to their sanctuary. The Palestinians let fly with a barrage of stones, hoping it would keep them away. The stones fell on Jews who were making no claim on Muslim shrines, but simply praying peacefully at the Western Wall. Israeli police saw it as an unprovoked attack against people celebrating a religious holy day, the Jewish Feast of the Tabernacle.
The Arabs knew that at the walls there would be tens of thousands of Jews, and that this was the right day, actually the best day for them to draw attention to them, to the Intifada, to the PLO.
Comparisons between Iraq's takeover of Kuwait and the Israeli-occupied territories.
There is not any linkage between these two problems. It's a deep difference, a deep gap.
In fact, Israel took East Jerusalem and the West Bank after the Jewish state was attacked by Jordan in 1967. But this is Dean Reynolds for Nightline in Jerusalem.
Enough evidence to state categorically that what we saw was a deliberate, planned provocation. We had the Muslim insiders call in the rioters at 3:30 in the morning, well in advance of this provocation. We had stockpiling of rocks, boulders, other instruments that could be used for attacks and were used. We had the leaders of the Intifada showing up precisely at 10:05, just minutes before the riot began. From every available evidence that we have today, this was a deliberate, violent attack whose aim was twofold. One, to divert attention from Saddam Hussein in the Gulf, and two, to revive the Intifada.
Mr. Arakat.
Policemen were outnumbered by roughly 100 to 1. The crowd, the Muslim crowd, the rioters were about 4,000. The policemen numbered about 45. The crowd locked the gates behind them, burned the police station, were moving into them. They tried tear gas, it didn't work. They tried stopping them with rubber bullets, that didn't work. And they were about literally to be lynched, and they had to save their lives. I doubt, Sam, that any police force anywhere in the world would have acted differently. But I'm curious as to these condemnations because, you know, we've had other instances. We've had, for example, a riot in Mecca, a Muslim riot in 1987 of Muslim pilgrims. 402 pilgrims were killed by the Saudi forces, demonstrators, not rock-throwing people attacking other worshippers. Muslim demonstrators killed in 2 hours by the Saudi forces. No Security Council, no outrage expressed. Just as there's been no outrage expressed in other incidents. I think that here you have an instance of a Jewish site attacked, the holiest site of the Jewish people attacked by Muslim rioters. And I'm very, very sorry about what happened. But I think there's a double standard. One could ask troops who are trying to stop a huge mob from tearing into them and, in fact, getting into the Temple Mount. You can imagine what would have happened if the rioters got through. If you had a melee there of thousands of rioters.
I understand that is your view, and I should have asked my question a little better. My question really is your reaction to the United States view. We've seen yours, but how does Israel react to its friend, the United States, proposing that kind of draft language, condemning what it says was excessive violence?
Well, I suggest we wait for the final draft, but I think that a lot of people are saying that maybe there should have been greater force, not the greater use of force, but greater forces on site. And in fact, it's out of deference to the holy sites, Muslims and Jews, that we keep minimal forces there. But
you mean greater force? What would the greater force have resulted in? More deaths?
No, we're talking about a larger contingent of police forces on the Mount because we had a very small, very, very small police presence there. But I think that the larger issue, Sam, is this. There is an attempt here today to divert attention from the Gulf. There is an attempt that we know for weeks of Saddam Hussein with Arafat through the Intifada to try to stir up violence with any means possible to try to get international attention away from the Gulf.
That's
they tried this before, and they're trying it again.
That's a good point.
By the way, his language, contrary to Mr. Arakat's statement, is translated in every language, including English. But his language was evidenced on the sands of Kuwait. He is killing people. He is conquering a country. He is pillaging. I didn't notice any condemnation of that action by Mr. Arakat or the PLO with whom he sympathizes. In fact, they loved it. And when he asked to burn half of Israel, they loved that too. So to say of Saddam Hussein that, well, we'll sort of look with neutrality or he expresses our language, that tells you very much what kind of objectives are involved here. Mr. Arakat, I would like to see him condemn the 300 Palestinian deaths caused by the Intifada by PLO death squads. This is what is at issue here. It's the Saddam Hussein mentality that is trying to inspire violence, terror, mob rule throughout the Middle East. And what we need is the full square facing up against it. We need men of peace of both sides, of all sides, to resist it. And I wish I could see that here. A clear-cut rejection of all violence.
Mr. Arakat, do you, as Mr. Netanyahu charges, love Saddam Hussein's threat to burn Israel?
Well, I think Mr. Netanyahu once again proves that he's a man of propaganda and he's a man who tries to score points.
Well, what may I ask? What's the answer? Do you love
Mr. Netanyahu? Mr. Netanyahu knows that the PLO.
Do you condemn it? Do you condemn
Saddam
Hussein's action in Kuwait?
Let Mr. Arakat answer. Do you love Saddam Hussein's threat to burn Israel?
Well, I think Saddam Hussein was in response to, if he were to be attacked by Israel, he would respond. And I don't like wars. I don't wish that war will break out in the region. I, as a Palestinian, the PLO was the second Arab party next to Egypt that have recognized Israel, that accepted 242. But I would like to ask Mr. Netanyahu, where does this lead us to? I'm a Palestinian moderate. I'm a Palestinian leader who led in this line of recognizing Israel and accepting 242. And my public opinion is banging now on the table, telling me payback time. And all I could show them is Mr. Netanyahu, Mr. Sharon, Mr. Shamir, the most extremist government in the history of the State of Israel. And at a time when walls are crumbling between East and West, at times when Mandela is meeting with de Klerk, comes Mr. Netanyahu and Mr. Shamir and says to my people, only by the sword shall this region live.
Mr. Netanyahu, where is your give? Where is, in fact, your compromise on this?
Well, as you know, we've offered an election plan as a prelude to peace negotiations. We've said that Palestinian Arabs should choose their own leadership from within the territory. If Mr. Arakat gathered the courage, if he says he's a genuine Palestinian moderate, let him run in these elections. Let him disown himself from the PLO, say, I will run. If he has the courage, he might get a bullet in his vein, or he might succeed.
Our time is limited. Let me change the subject on you and ask you one other question that's on people's minds.
Sam, I just want to say,
go ahead,
one thing.
A quick answer, and then I have a question.
Just one sentence. It was the Israelis, it was Mr. Shamir who rejected his own ideas about elections. It was Mr. Shamir that rejected Baker's points of going to Cairo.
Let me ask my question to Mr. May I interrupt? I'm sorry. Let me ask my question to Mr. Netanyahu. Some people believe that Israel would love to see the United States get into a war with Saddam and is working behind the scenes to accomplish that. Will you address that?
I'm losing your audio.
Well, some people, I said, can you hear me now?
Hello?
Hello? Can you hear me now?
Hello?
I guess not. Mr. Netanyahu, are you there? I think not. Mr. Erekat, I'm going to have to give you the last word, which is all right with me. Do you think that Israel wants the United States to go to war against Iraq?
Sam, I lost part of your question, but I understood that you asked whether Israel would want the United States to go to war with Iraq. Yes. And the answer is Israel doesn't want to see any war in the Middle East. In fact, we were very much perturbed by the action of Iraq. We know that Iraq is making threats left and right, including against us. But the important thing, I think, is to have an international coalition that says to this type of mentality, to the Saddam Hussein mentality, and his colleagues Arafat and Gaddafi, look, don't think of it. Don't do it.
All right. I'm going to apologize to both of you and to our audience for the audio problems. It gives us a problem getting answers from our guests when they can't hear the questions. But I thank both of you, Mr. Netanyahu and Mr. Erekat, for being with us tonight on Nightline. When we come back...
It was not necessary. It was a result of a organized provocation of some Arab terrorists.
Prime Minister Shamir also brushed off a new demand by Saddam Hussein that Israel leave the occupied territories. And he denied any relationship between the troubles in the territories and the invasion of Kuwait.
Dominated by Islam, you might not expect to see this religion thrive here. Even more unusual, however, is the church's priest, Father Iyad Abraham. He is a high-ranking member of the PLO and has been...
From the very beginning, when Arafat started his movement, 1964.
The frail, 80-year-old priest says there are many Catholics in the PLO and that Arafat has surrounded himself, surprisingly, with Christians because...
It is not a Muslim movement. It's a Palestinian movement, national movement.
Use the Gulf crisis as a blessing in disguise.
This next segment of CNN News indeed shows the stone throwing, but again attempts to say it's the attempt of the Arabs to defend themselves against the Temple Mount faithful. As I pointed out, this small group of about 30 people had left already quite some time before, and were never even allowed to go up on the Temple Mount. What they're stoning are the Jews at the wall, not a demonstration.
Police opened fire on rock-throwing Palestinians at the Temple Mount in Jerusalem's Old City. The clash erupted after Palestinians began hurling stones at thousands of Jews worshiping below at the Wailing Wall, Jerusalem's holiest site. The rocks started flying apparently because of rumors Jews would try to establish a temple.
We see the same phenomena on Dean Reynolds' ABC News, where he shows the Arab throwing the rock and tries to tie it in to the handful of demonstrators who had left a long time ago.
A group of fundamentalist Jews arrived to press their demand to build a temple on the Muslim sanctuary. Palestinians said they were defending one of their holiest shrines. Attack for today's Jewish holy day to get attention for their uprising and to link their situation to the crisis in the Gulf.
Channel 9 is a bit fairer. They show the same footage of stone throwing, but do not state that this is a response to Arab fears. Later, they give the Arabs' version, but do not bother to point out that the Temple Mount faithful had left some time ago.
Violence began Monday morning when Palestinians set fire to a police station at the Temple Mount and hurled rocks at Jews worshiping at the nearby Western Wall. Arab sources say the rock throwing was prompted by reports that a group of ultra-nationalist Jews intended to march to the Temple Mount to try and lay the cornerstone of a new Jewish temple. The Mount is holy to both Jews and Arabs, but is controlled by Muslims.
Was quick to deny Palestinian charges that the Israeli police action was a direct provocation.
We tried with tear gas and rubber bullets, but there was real danger to the lives of the people.
Channel 2 also repeats the false accusation that the stoning was against the Temple Mount faithful. Again, not mentioning that they're walking away. Then they say the stoning starts after the people at Temple Mount merely shouted at the police. That was not the case. They attacked the police post and were stoning up there before they started stoning the worshipers at the wall.
Rumors, ultra-Orthodox Jews were on their way to lay the cornerstone for a new Jewish temple on the site of the Holy Mosque. The violence reportedly started when Palestinians shouting at the Jews were showered with tear gas by Israeli police.
It's nothing new that both Catholic priests and the media are against Jews. No, in this day and age, many are leaving these traditions, thank God. A survey was made by Lynn Kesselman, which is available for viewing at our video library, which is partly funded by the Jewish Agency for Israel. We'll close with a bit from it and some happy music, because it's a Jewish belief that we always end with something happy. Even the saddest things are only on the path to ultimate happiness back in Eden.
Hello, I'm Lynn Kesselman. Many of us believe that Israel has gotten very bad press in the last several years, and that this bad press is not warranted by the actual events in Israel. But very few know the techniques used by the media to bias the news, and still fewer understand why it is done. Our presentation, Israel and the Media, is a survey of newspaper coverage of Israel and the Middle East over a 2-year period beginning with the Arab riots in December of 1987. It will show you the techniques used to bias the news, such as the use of misleading headlines, misleading photographs and captions, as well as the omission of relevant facts. But before we take a look at the news from Israel and the Middle East, let's look at some very important facts about Israel and her neighbors.
First of all, you should know that Israel is a very small country. In this map of the United States, the tiny blue area in the middle is an outline of the state of Israel drawn to scale. In this map of the Middle East, it's very difficult to even find Israel. Israel's landmass is 1/650th the size of that of the 22 Arab countries which surround it. But Americans who read the newspapers are led to believe that Israel is a very big country. This is a map of the Mideast as seen by the media. Every major news organization has an office in Israel. At the height of the Arab riots, Israel had the 3rd highest number of foreign correspondents in the world after Washington, D.C. and London. A major reason for this is that Israel is an open and democratic country where reporters have access to all segments of society. Israel, with very few exceptions usually related to military security, does not censor the news. This very openness to the media, which flows from Israel's democratic values, is turned into a weapon used against her as her Arab enemies have become more sophisticated in their manipulation of the media. The media, hungry for headlines and sensational photographs, seem eager to be manipulated by anyone who will provide them with whatever will sell. During the Arab riots, it was common knowledge that demonstrations were planned and news reporters invited by the Arab demonstrators in advance, as illustrated in this cartoon from the Toronto Star. On the other hand, the other countries of the Middle East are ruled by dictators, elected by no one and answerable only to themselves. All news reporting from these countries is controlled by the government. The American media relies on government-issued news bulletins, as well as the writings of local reporters who are subject to varying degrees of intimidation and harassment by the authorities. Now let's see what the media has to tell us about Israel. Here are some examples of news reporting on Israel. Please look at the headlines. Israeli soldiers kill Gaza Strip protester. Israelis kill Palestinian youth. Israeli soldier kills woman. Israel is always labeled with the strong and aggressive verb. You will also notice that the casualties in these incidents are personalized whenever possible. The fact that the injured party is a woman or a youth is always emphasized. Arab aggression, on the other hand, is hidden or disguised. Look at the top headline. Italian airliner captain is shot, wounded at Bombay airport. This is the story of how Arab terrorists hijacked an Italian jetliner and shot the captain, but you would never guess that from the headline. This headline reads, 40 die as rival militias battle in Lebanon. 40 people have died from Arab violence. But isn't it strange? Nobody kills anybody here. People just die. Notice what a difference it makes when the passive verb die is used instead of the active verb kill.
לאחר משנת 1970 או 71, תחילה מ-1957, מסתבר שאת מחלוצות סרטוני הפרסומת המדברים עברית.
כן.
את זוכרת את שלטוקס, אותך ואת בום בצור בסרטון של אפרים קישון?
כן, היו שניים, אחד כזה קצר והשני באיזה לונה פארק נדמה לי.
אז הנה אחד, ואז הייתה סבלנות בפרסומת, שימי לב.
חבל על המרץ, פלטיאל. את הזבובים תשאיר לשלטוקס. שלטוקס מהפירוש, הקץ לזבוב וליתוש.
זאת הייתה פעם סיסמה מאוד מאוד ידועה. אגב, את יודעת שבהתבוננות בסרטון הזה מסתבר שביתך איה
היא נורא דומה לי.
דומה לך וגם...
ואני דומה לה עכשיו, זאת אומרת.
וגם לבעלך, גם לשלמה שובל, הסופר, איש של שניכם, אין שום ספק בזה. את ביימת את איה בבית צבי היא בוגרת בצבי, ביעקב וליידנטל. זאת הייתה חוויה בטח מיוחדת במינה, לא?
בהחלט מיוחדת, מכל מיני בחינות מיוחדת. זאת אומרת, אתה גם נהיה פתאום איזה קמצן, לא קמצן, אבל מין, אתה צריך לתת משהו משלך במתנה למישהו. פתאום אתה מוצא את עצמך באמת נותן את המתנה בחום וברצון, כמו להעביר איזה משהו במסורת של דבר, כי הם, מה שעשיתי איתם זה מצאתי לנכון לעשות בדיוק את הפרודוקציה שאנחנו עשינו. זאת אומרת, הם למדו מה שנקרא פרטיטורה. חוץ מזה, זה בת שאני לא ידעתי איזה שחקנית אני אפגוש. היו לנו, אבל אני מוכרחה להגיד לזכותה שהיא הייתה הרבה יותר מבוגרת נכונה בהתנהגות שלה מאשר אני.
מה מעשה עכשיו כשהיא סיימה את הלימודים?
היא, כמו כולם, בחיפושים אחרי עבודה, וכי כפי הנראה תהיה בתיאטרון לילדים ולנוער.
שיהיה בהצלחה.
אני מקווה.
ולסיום, עוד קטע שהבטחתי, והקטע הזה הוא משנת 1970. אנטואן סטלח הוא שביים את התוכנית. עומרי ניצן, נדמה לי, ביים את השחקנים.
כן.
שירי ברטולד ברכט וקורט וייל. ג'ני קלת הפיראטים, החלק האחרון של השיר הזה בביצועך.
ומאות של מלאכים אז ירדו אל החוף ויפשטו ברחובות בסטף. יוציאו כל אדם מכל פתח שבעיר, יאסרו בכבלים ויביאו לפניי, ישאלו אותי מי מאלה בן מוות? כן, מי מאלה? מי בן מוות? ובצהריים הסיו שלהם